Welcome back to FinTech Talent's virtual conference on open finance. My name is Peter Fishman, and I'm moderating our next panel discussion entitled The Journey to an Open Institution. We have a terrific lineup of panelists today, whom I'll introduce momentarily. But before I do, I'd like to remind everyone to post any comments or questions for the panelists in the chat window of your conference app. Since we are pre-recording this panel discussion, panelists will be available on the day of the conference to respond to your posts in real time. So let's jump right in with introductions. Today's panelists include Tanya Imamovich, Open API business owner at Raiffeisen Bank International, Lana Taherli Abdullayeva, a strategic advisor specializing in digital financial services, and Rita Martins, Innovation and FinTech Partnerships for Finance and Risk at HSBC. And again, I'm Peter Fishman, an independent advisor to FinTechs and financial institutions. So as moderator, I'll help direct the conversation, but I want to encourage my panelists to jump in on any topic, especially if they have a contrarian view, as I find a healthy debate makes for a more interesting panel discussion. So let's start the discussion with each panelist introducing themselves in more depth, and in doing so, sharing how they define open finance and how they're each involved with this. So Tanya, do you want to go first?
Yes, thank you, Peter. So as you mentioned, Tanya Imamovich, Open API business owner for Raiffeisen Bank International. I've been working on the topic of open banking that started in Europe with PSD2 for almost 3 years now. We are way beyond PSD2, but actually I am realizing that there are still many discussions about whether do we want to stay here? Is it about just regulation, or do we really want to move towards something more similar to open finance and toward openness? And this is actually where the crucial difference for me is, and how do I define for myself open finance? From today's perspective, where majority of the banks expose data and services due to fact that regulator pushed us into, towards a world where all of our data and capabilities will be ready to be exposed and open, so that we can more easily innovate and build with external partners ecosystems that are more customer-centric and ecosystems that are focused around on the customers and are established around the customers. So from pure, let's say, account aggregation that we have today as regulation, towards not only offering financial data, but also encouraging other institutions to provide access to their own data and services, so that at the end, the customers can benefit out of it.
Excellent, thank you. Lana, do you want to go next?
Thank you, Peter. And quite like a few points Tanya mentioned, so I'll be building on that. I am a scientist by education, strategist by experience, and visionary by heart. And now I've nearly 3 decades in tech and fin internationally, having privilege to work with well-known international brands, with public sector as well as with private sector, driving a digital economy and digital financial services. I was fortunate to be involved in open banking in the UK, right at the early stage of shaping it by the regulators, and moving forward with PSD2 in Europe, and now open finance and open data. I actually think and kind of want to take us a little bit back on the financial services history. The financial services system of the past was based on distribution of localized physical assets. And in the past few decades, we were using technology successfully to automate the manual processes that design in that ecosystem. The point that we reach in financial services and banking and financial services today is actually an economic problem. The fact there's a Guardian paper, a good one, comes that by 2030, banks as we know today would cease to exist. The economic problem of the design of financial services lies in the fact that the customer acquisition is about $350 per customer, and the revenue from non-lending customer is about 250. So that productivity, it just doesn't work anymore with all the challenges we have. So bringing us back to open finance. Open finance gives us opportunity to use the technology to redesign financial services, to really embrace the digital revolution and get the services that a customer expect closer to the customer journey. To introduce new business models such as platform businesses, such as embedded finance, and bring new players to the financial ecosystem. So that openness is really not about just APIs, and it's just not about the meeting regulatory expectations. It's redesigning your board talent. It's redesigning your organizational structures. It's bringing everybody in a different mindset, more customer-centric mindset, and driving the culture through the design of organization and vision for the end customer.
Excellent, Lana. And I'm sure we're going to dive into a lot of the topics you touched upon through our discussion. So thank you for raising those. Rita, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I'm Rita Martins, and like you're saying, I work within HSBC. So I work with the finance and the risk teams to drive innovation. And this year I'm going to be focusing, or early next year, I would like to say, I'm going to be focusing even more on fintechs partnerships. And for me, open finance, it's really about open innovation, which I think both Tanya and Lena have mentioned also. So it's really about open innovation, open collaboration. And it's interesting because it's not just about open collaboration externally, so as with a fintech or as with a startup, but it's also about open collaboration internally. So if you think of big organizations, there is a lot of already good innovation and trying and testing. So making sure that we collaborate also internally, it's something very important for me.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. So Tanya, back to you. What I'd love to understand from your perspective, what are the lessons learned to date from open banking, and how would these be relevant to our journey to an open institution?
From where to start? So on one side, I think that one of the most important lessons from open banking is that too much noise can create so many obstacles for successful journey. And in case of open banking or PSD2, there is so much noise from external stakeholders about what PSD2 will bring to the banking industry, starting from the very first that PSD2 and open APIs enabled via PSD2 will take away all of our customers as one end, all the way to the opposite end where they were talking about PSD2 APIs purely bringing some new income generators, huge income sources. What this did, actually, this created completely different expectations within a broader stakeholder group within well, I can say maybe traditional banking industry or traditional banking group. Maybe this is not the case with others. So the first learning that I really want to emphasize is we need to talk much more about what open banking, or in this case, open finance, is really about. It is really not about exposing one or another API and then losing entire customer database or generating huge new income. It is about what I think all three of us mentioned here and there. First of all, it is journey. It is about changing the mindset. It is about finding out how you can use technology in a different way to build services around your customers. It is about open innovation, which is huge change comparing to what we do now. And as Rita said, and this is actually one of the major cornerstones of our own open API strategy, it is about completely different ways of collaboration with external parties. So I would say that the major learning is talk more about what to expect work more on awareness building and education, and then the change will happen by default. With open banking or PSD2, from my experience, and also from experience of my colleagues, because we are quite connected and we talk a lot, we lost so much time into trying to convince stakeholders that, yeah, by opening one open API, you will not lose your own customer database. But then we were faced like, yeah, but did you read this or did you read that? Because of all of those that noise that was around us. So less noise, more concrete examples, more real experience, and more awareness building. This would be my main takeaway for the future.
Rita, do you agree? As another banker's perspective, does that resonate with you?
Yes, it does. I think I always talk about this as a journey. And before, like as a big bank, you start and you really try and learn about new technologies, and you learn about innovation. And now I think we got to a point where we have learn as much as we can, and we're now open to start doing the collaboration. And I totally agree, like Tanya was saying, like we need to make sure it's really a partnership, that there is not just open APIs, but what is each one of us bringing to the table, and is it really the right partnerships? Do we have the same values? Are we looking for the same things? And to be honest, it's something that we have already started with, something that we need to work together. I don't think it's so much about calling it open finance or calling it open banking, but it's really much more about, okay, what are the actions from both sides that we can really go and do it? And then if there are partnerships that didn't go well, let's learn from it, and let's make sure that we bring that to the next conversations that we have with other partners.
And when you say both sides, do you mean consumers, or are you talking fintech and banks, or internal stakeholders? Who are the two sides there?
So when I say two sides, I'm thinking about internal stakeholders and external stakeholders.
Gotcha. Okay. Lana, looks like you wanted to jump in here, please.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective. And I could relate to the large banks view, right? So just maybe I wasn't explicit in the introduction. I done 2 years with Lloyds Banking Group as Payments Innovation Director, and Open Banking was one of my responsibility. So what I'm proud to say what we've done well. Also, I'm not authorized to speak on behalf of Lloyds Banking Group anymore. But what we've done well, and I'm proud to share that experience, that we embrace the regulatory challenge into moving with our strategic ambition to become largest UK digital bank. And we also invested in building the team capabilities in that respect. We invested in our banking app with embracing that open banking journey. So we were really focusing on the customer and thinking about what else we could offer to the customer. In that respect, when COVID came along, and I'm a customer of Lloyds Banking Group, and I'm using my Lloyds app still, and I'm enjoying it as a customer of Lloyds Banking Group. So I think that's something to say, that even as a large institution, in a traditional institution, you have other regulatory responsibilities, and you have other products, and you have other challenges that you could still embrace a part of the journey and really focusing on what you can do for your end customer. But I think that wasn't my main point in terms of what we could learn from open banking. Having been involved both in UK and Europe in open banking UK, as well as PSD2, I think there are a couple of things I would like to mention. UK was really strict on API standards, which was much more democratized and open for discussion for PSD2. And by really embracing that single API standard, it helps the industry to get along faster and really invest in that new ecosystem, and allows a better interoperability. But by doing it with regulatory forces on both sides in PSD2 and in UK, we actually lost track of the who is a customer and who is end user, right? We really think that consumer who are end users, they are the customers, and we are pushing the education, and we're surprised why there is no adoption. I think the customers are really those new fintech companies who could embrace that and deliver and create a new service, new proposition, a better way of serving the end customer. The customers of open banking could be those large corporate brands who are not necessarily part of the financial services ecosystem today, and we could bring some of the capabilities in the data, in the payments to the customer journey. So that's I think the biggest point that was missed by pushing it from regulatory side of view. You almost kind of create that defensiveness and that mindset that both Rita and Tanya was also talking about. You are actually pushing to that set of the mindset, creating defensiveness. So I think the opportunities maybe shift the dial a little bit and allow emergence and creation of new innovative solutions with a focus on the customer, not on regulation, not on competition, but serving the customer.
Yeah, I would say that with open banking, we may have really not seen the level of customer adoption the industry expected to see. And what I'm hearing from you, Lana, is a different focus on how we go about doing open finance may, and the ecosystem of partners involved may drive kind of better customer experiences, better adoption by customers. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes, and no. So the point is really invest in breaking the boundaries of the traditional business models, of the traditional industry silos, right? So technology today allows you to do that, and focusing on nourishing and flourishing and enablement of those coexistence of those models in the wider ecosystem. So I think the opportunity, and COVID just pushed the need for that for the digital economy, is use the technology for better interoperability and use the regulation to ensure customer protection, to ensure ecosystem protection, rather than using regulation to forcing on the competition or innovation. I think innovation happens when you kind of enable it rather than when you force it.
Gotcha. So let's talk about what's going to be required, as we look forward to, developing the open institution. What's really going to be required to become an open institution? Is it, we've said it's not just, issuing APIs dictated by the regulators, but certainly APIs are a part of it, new data protocols. And you mentioned silos. What are some of the challenges we're going to see there? To adding open finance to the digital roadmap. Tanya, you want to jump in?
Yes, sure. So what is needed for us? So first of all, I think that regulators will really play an important role based on the experience that we had with PSD2. Why? Because still without regulator defining PSD2, majority of banks in EU would never even think about opening up and providing any kind of data, or this would be so small that it would be even something that we don't have to even look at. Beside the regulator role, I think that everything what I mentioned before, right? From the technology perspective, banks with big legacy systems, they already now hopefully majority of them is already working on preparing their internal systems and enabling connectivity with external beyond PSD2, right? If they are not doing that, then I think that they should ask themselves, how do they plan to survive in this world of ecosystems? Besides this complete change of their own legacy systems, then we are stepping into the area where we have to talk about mindset, what is needed for open finance. When the product is being developed, you have to start to look into third parties as potential customers from the very beginning. So now you have to add one additional dimension to product development, from thinking only about end customer and your own direct channels toward immediately from the very beginning having in mind this one additional dimension that can serve or address third parties or external stakeholders that can help you innovate and push even product further on. So here I think that the mindset plays important role, and the skill set as well. We already within banking industry, we have to talk about business persona that understand technology quite well, because we are talking not talking anymore about standard product development with standard cost benefit analysis and that those marketing pamphlets that were available in branches. We talk about much broader scope of channels via which we can expose and deliver our products and services. And in terms of skill sets, I think that financial industry, as said, majority of us already is on that path, but there are still some who needs to start to work towards that. We need to think about skill set that big technology companies already have as default as of today, right? You have to think about designers, about marvelous front-end developers, about cloud engineers. So some part of skill sets that were not, let's say, regular within financial industry until maybe two or 3 years ago. So there are many small bricks that need to be compiled in order for us to successfully walk this open finance journey. I think what is great is that on one side, regulator is quite active in this area. I would kind of appreciate if they would look a little bit in other industries as well, because a bit broader openness could really bring the let's say, even a perfect model of innovation and creation of new services for the end customers. Yeah, maybe someone would like to.
Yeah, I would like to add. So I totally agree with what Tanya was saying. It's interesting. I think in any conversations that we go to, like two of the ones that you mentioned are definitely something that we always mention. So the first one is really the mindset, and the second one is really training and reskilling the current teams that we have. So as the financial services are going to change, of course, we need to train the existing teams. So you don't just have financial services knowledge, but you also need to have a mix of other knowledges. And you need to have a mix of different people with different skill sets in those conversations, instead of just having very technology people or very business people. The third one that I would definitely add to this conversation, and is something that it's already spoken in the market, is really the onboarding. This is all really great, and I think financial services that come to the table and say we really want to collaborate, but at the same time, the onboarding process does still take a while, and we are looking into it. I think there's a few brands that are already looking into it, but how can we make sure that we can really onboard our partners much faster, so it doesn't take so long, I guess, from both sides, and especially if you're thinking from a fintech and a startup, when they're working with big organizations, it's really hard for them to wait for so long to be onboarded. So I would say that's the third one that I will add.
Rita, are you seeing any advances on that dimension, whether it's creating data sandboxes or streamlining sort of the vendor approval process or the partnership approval process? What can we, because I agree, from my experience in banking, it can take months to onboard a new vendor just to get the okay to start working with them from the point of a signed contract. So what ideas do you have, or what have you seen that's working well to streamline that process?
Definitely. So I think it has been on the market. There is this fast track thing where HSBC and other banks that come together and say it's a fast track where we really onboard different fintechs. The other one that you're mentioning is we have sandboxes in which they're open for everyone internally to be able to test it. But then we still need to make sure that we have the right approvals, that we have the right data. So how can we make sure that we look into the data sharing as well? So one of the things that you can look at that we have been started looking at is really the getting synthetic data. So if we sanitize some of our data, could we have that and use that through sandboxes as well, and have that as fast for onboarding? There's other things I have seen in the market, and there's some really great startups going on in this space actually, where they're trying to not just have an ecosystem where you have both large organizations and fintechs, but then they will also help us being the third party working on the procurement space. And I think that one is still very new, but I think it's a space to look out for, definitely.
I think, I agree on the mindset and the talent bit part, but I think I would just kind of take it aside a little bit. It sounds like very isolated ways to tackle the problem, right? So here we need to onboard fintechs, therefore we fast track process, we need to create something. So I think fundamentally to me is about whole organization and design of the organization in very kind of bringing the talent, not only as engineers or to your kind of squads, and to digital talent, to the boards, people who understand the digital business model, people who actually digitally native and understand what digital native is. To me, if you have API evangelist in the organization, or if you have head of innovation, or if you have head of digital, that's already wrong. It should be across organization right from the top. And the things also how you reward people, how you bring people to how you allocate your capital, how you report your capital, right? For the true innovation, you really have to ensure that you allow experiment to happen. And any scientist will tell you, you need to allow failure of the experiment, right?
Yeah.
And in the current, if you have the change budget, that's it. You killed it right there, right? You need to allow experiment, fail, learn, and then create something new. So that's one aspect of it. You need to bring teams together to design the customer experience as well as risk and compliance, as well as the audit, right in that agile fashion. You need to be able to actually create something quickly, to test something quickly, to fail, to learn, and move forward. So those kind of incremental, gradual learnings to create something that's really important. So that design and culture that would shift mindset of organization across the board rather than focusing on just one department. And the part of collaboration with the fintech is really important as well, because if you're a large organization and you have a huge market share, especially for consumers, you can't really change your wheels as you are driving. You expect the market, the regulators, the public, your customers, they expect to provide you core services. So bringing some of the fintech innovators to collaborate that, to ensure to embrace that collective power of experiment, it is great opportunity. And to be fair, I think if you say what learnings, who done it well, right? It's a card companies. Visa and MasterCard do it the best, right? And look outside on the market globally, they invest in that innovation. They are actually not shy to invest in some startup companies, and then some actually result as acquisition, as we know, Plate, for example. But that's probably, I think both Visa and MasterCard could give a best example to some of the large digital banks how to move forward. So that's my personal view, I think.
So fascinating set of topics you've raised there, and as I think about it, part of what we're talking about here is really a cultural shift that isn't incremental or serial. It's a number of things having to change simultaneously, right? You touched on agile, and one could add on to that design thinking. But this topic of incentives is really interesting to me as I think about the way P&Ls are aligned traditionally in banks at a product level. How does that come into play here, and how will product development have to change as we think about the opportunities that open finance provides? The traditional thought of a P&L being product by product, is that becoming an antiquated model? Maybe it's a leading question. I think it is, but I think our product development will inevitably have to shift toward value propositions that combine multiple products and not necessarily have the bank think about product by product.
Absolutely. And it's absolutely different business models, right? So don't get me wrong. Banks do certain things extremely well, right? And I don't think as we are moving next sort of decade, I expect diversity of proposition, diversity of value proposition, as you say. I don't think it's one box fits all. And some perhaps decide to focus much more kind of core banking services, which is in their DNA and which they do extremely well. They're custodians of the consumers' money and then businesses' money. They know how to lend and how to get money back. So there's all services that is really core DNA of banking, and I would expect it to stay in that banking space, and there are others who could learn from that. But there's also a shift on the banking and service, or banking and payment service, perhaps, which could be done through different models.
Let's bring in the. Sorry to interrupt you. Let's bring in the banker's perspective on this as well. Rita or Tanya, what are your thoughts?
Maybe I can then start. So I would like to reflect on several things that Lana even mentioned before your question regarding product development, but I will also reflect on that one. So what Lana said was one thing that I really subscribe to, and this is that strong digital leadership will be needed for one organization to move toward openness, because the C-level you cannot educate, right? There has to be someone who really believes in different ways of doing things and in different business models, who know how these things work so that they can drive the organization. And then to this, you can basically add these incentive models, and incentive models will then drive by default different ways how we are developing products, right? One thing that I would not agree with is what Lana, I think, mentioned, and this is failure culture, agile development. This is default today. I think that in majority of organization, in big organizations, this is already default state. But you can have failure culture, you can have agile development, and still you can stay close as the organization and not move toward openness and toward different ways how you develop things. So yeah, once again, I would underline that from my own personal perspective, I think from, yeah, let's say from the top, from digital leadership, as Lana mentioned, from different incentive models towards a different mindset, a different skill set, people who naturally think in multiple dimensions and not only one direct channel toward customers. And to reflect maybe then on the product development and what you mentioned, how this P&L structured, we talk now only about profitability of loans, profitability of cards, or we are looking more value streams. I think naturally that we will move towards value streams, but this will not be an easy exercise. So the entire P&L model of one bank is based on product profitability. So the way how we are measuring our success is already so deeply defined that, yeah, here I have to say I don't expect change in the
exactly, and that's the
future,
point, that agile development happens only in development world, but the agile development at Google starts with the customer. You know, that's a fundamental difference, that agile development is only about development. It is about embracing whole digital mindset and customer-centric mindset, right? It's expecting to bring services to the customer rather than customer to come to the banks. And that's a different combination. But I would like to talk a little bit more about different business models, because that's opportunity. That's really opportunity to innovate, right? And that's what you were referring to Peter, about how to have multidimensional way to serve customers. Things like platform businesses, things like bank as a service, which allow for embedded finance to bring the finance to the customer journey, and really to serve customer with a customer-centric mindset to their needs. It's not about coming back to your banking app to look for the payments. It's just pressing the button at the time when you're purchasing something on e-commerce, for example, or buying your holidays. It's that element of serving customer at the customer life cycle rather than at the product life cycle. And that's a different mindset, but that's a real opportunity. But also the platform businesses, like look on our smartphones, for example. We didn't ask Apple to invent smartphone, right? And others to invent smartphone. It came with a value add, and we embraced it. And now, because through that iPhone or other smartphones, we are getting all other services. You know, it's fully sticky with us, and we are not thinking about going somewhere else. Is that opportunity to invite others to your playground and allow others to create services for your end customer that would make the overall end-to-end value proposition sticky for your customer, and maximize that. That's where the opportunity lies for the more kind of innovators or financial services world.
So Rita, what is your thought on that piece as well, especially where you're sitting in sort of this partnership space?
So like Lena, I think we totally agree. Like, we want to collaborate. I think the financial services that have said we want to collaborate. We cannot do this by ourselves, and for sure the customer is at the center. I would agree with Tanya in some senses, like agile, digital thinking. These are all things that we have already been trained, and we're training everyone. Of course, if you think about it, it's a really big organization. It's an organization that is not just based in the UK, it's a global organization. So to make sure that you bring everyone into the same table, it takes a while, but we are already start thinking about using digital thinking, for example, to start with the customer at the center. Even when we're thinking of innovation internally, how do we improve your internal processes? So we are already on this journey, and I agree. I think the main thing is really the mindset. So there is a lot of training, retraining, bringing different peoples, bringing different views into these conversations internally, and also having our partners being a fintechs or being consultants or being vendors to help us on that mindset journey. So I think we are on this journey. Maybe it hasn't been seen as so much from the industry perspective, but I would agree. I think the large organizations who already design thinking is something you'll be impressed how many times you'll have design thinking and training internally.
So is the risk, though, of open finance that banks end up being the infrastructure suppliers to some other third party who owns the customer relationship? Or are you, how are you thinking about it in that context? Or are you thinking that this will just allow the bank to deliver a broader set of value add to the customer, but still having the bank be the in control?
So, like from my perspective, there's going to be several models, right? So there is some processes that we want to keep for ourselves, but we need partnerships, or we might want to decide to build it internally. But there are other services which it's not our expertise. We don't want to be our expertise, so we'll bring someone externally to partner with us. I think that the main thing is, yes, like big organizations that have been here for a while, so we have a lot of customer knowledge. Of course, we cannot do everything, and that's why we are keen to partner with external partners and internally.
Great. Well, we are sort of winding down on our time. Can we? Yes.
If I,
hey, Tanya.
Peter,
Please,
I would just like to add one thing. Sorry for interrupting, and this is to basically answer to your question with the question: who owns the customer relationship today? No one. Customer is a part of so many ecosystems around them that you cannot talk about one player owning the direct relationship. This is why openness and collaboration is key for the future.
You say it better than I did.
From my own perspective.
Well, let's, in the remaining few seconds we have, let's go around the horn one more time with kind of final thoughts or predictions, maybe 30 seconds each, if you will. So, Lana, do you want to go first?
So as I mentioned right in my introduction, the Gartner paper that by 2030, the banks as we know them today would not exist, and I tend to agree with that. I expect the banks would become a bit more diverse in their proposition. Some would decide to focus on their core services. Some perhaps would transform to much more digital service and through partnerships, perhaps. And I do expect more platform and bank as a service models in the financial services ecosystem.
Rita?
Yeah, so I think hopefully in the future we'll see much more partnerships and we'll see much more diverse thoughts. So having different skill sets is something I'm very excited about, where you really have internally, you have a different set of people and skill sets and bringing something new into the market.
Excellent. And Tanya, your last comment was a great closing remark, but anything else to add?
Yeah, just, I mean, predictions are really hard, especially after COVID and everything what happened in this year. But I think that one thing is for sure, and that is that openness is ahead of us. What this will lead us to,
that's a wrap for us today. My thanks to Lisa Moyle for organizing this great event, and to my terrific panelists for sharing their perspectives. I want to ask you to stay with us on the main stage for the final panel discussion of the day, Open and Interdependent Ecosystems, which will explore the new universe of partners, providers, and innovation that open finance can deliver. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.